Hello, Wasteland. Welcome to Wasteland Workshop, part 2 of 2. People. Just before we start this episode, I'd like to say thanks to everyone for watching the video I put up the other day. Thank you for liking it. Thank you for the 16 of you mad people that subscribed to it. And special thanks to Jarrett Lee for asking the question, do you find the figures in these kits a bit too large a scale for the cars, like Hot Wheels and Matchbox? Personally, no. I find these are just the right size. You get some cars that are a little too small or a little too big, like you get all sorts of size issues internally with Hot Wheels where trucks are the size of minis and things like that. But in terms of actually fitting in with other models and fitting in with the cars, not a problem at all. Like I mentioned in the last video, using the weapon arms, especially with different models. On my Leather Rebel build, I used the M14 or M15 machine gun arm. I used that on one of the Raiders from K Honeyman, and that's what you can see here, as well as a World War II German officer type cap on the blower, the air intake on the front of the vehicle. Well, Wasteland, what are we working on today? We're working on something that you would see in both the Wasteland and in this day and age. The truck. A technical truck, to be precise. So what is a technical? A technical is a kind of jury-rigged fighting vehicle, typically a flatbed truck, where they've taken a heavy machine gun, or in some cases even an aircraft weapon, and attached it to the rear. Okay, so going into this build, we're just going to say that there are a few things that we won't be doing. This is going to be a nice simple build, so we're not going to be de-rivetting the car, we're not going to be opening it up, changing the wheels, replacing the windscreens with mesh or anything like that. It's all going to be external, so any additions made will be on the outside rather than added to the inside that you can then see through. Because of that, we're not going to be, because we're not opening the car up, we're not going to be taking the metal body off and stripping the paint from it, so we're going to be sanding that down instead. And that all told, this should be quite a quick build. Tools wise, again, this is nice and simple. We've got Stanley knife file, I guess you could call it, pair of clippers and Gorilla Glue, wonderfully strong glue. Besides the Browning heavy machine gun that's going to be sat on the back of the Sheriff truck, it'll be like some extra bits and pieces from my bits box, but for the most part it's going to be Plasticard. In this case I'm just going to be using scraps, and any plastic rod or anything like that we want to add to it. The idea is, because this is a first build, it's going to be nice and simple. We're not going to be jumping in at the deep end. It's just going to be the, well, I say the basics, but it's going to be sort of, you know, what I like to consider the basics when I'm working on a car. I don't tend to just stick a gun on it and call it done. I like to really sort of work into it and add lots of little details and bits and pieces. So removing the tripod, removing the gunner, all of it. Trimming off any excess. There was a bit on the helmet and goggles as well on his back, and you get all these little stubs, these little nubs left over from the sprue, so you want to cut those off with a knife. And then once that's done, we're going to start working on the car. Now, the way I tend to work on my cars is, rather than just jump straight into filing and hacking, I like to look at them and come up with a plan. In this case, we can see the heavy machine gun can quite happily sit on the back of the truck on the flatbed area, but besides that we've got to think, well, these Sheriff decals are quite nice. Do we want to save them, you know, or do we want to paint over them, completely ignore them? Now, one of the things I like to do if I'm going to save a decal is use some masking tape. So if you don't know, masking tape is a wonderfully easily found tape available at any craft store, and it does what it says on the tin. You're masking off an area, so when you paint over it or model over it, you can peel the tape back and get the covered surface. With that done, what I like to do is take a file, or you can take sanding paper or anything really, as long as it makes a good scratch in it. Some people use a Dremel. We're going to be taking a file and we're going to be quote-unquote damaging the bodywork of the car. It's more surface area scratches. We're not trying to really damage it. I mean, we're not taking a hammer to it, but we do want to put in a lot of scratches and dents and marks that a car or a truck that's in the Wasteland would have, because at the end of the day these aren't going to be factory fresh. These things are going to be knocked about, they're going to be abused, they're going to look like shit. So that's where filing comes in. After we've filed them, we'll do a little work just comparing the machine gun on the back of the truck, just make sure that still looks right. And this is where any body modification comes in. So in this case I'm removing the grey plastic around the back of the truck bed, and off camera I'll remove the rear bumper, as I didn't quite like the look of it. Front bumper on the other hand, fantastic, we're going to keep that. We might even improve that down the line. So once we've decided that yes, this is how it's going to go forward, we're going to take some, it's aluminium car mesh, like for covering over damages and things, and we're going to measure up a bit for the back trailer bed. The flatbed, it's got quite a nice wood texture to it, you might not be able to see, but to be honest I don't like it that much. I much prefer having the mesh down. So it's just a simple case of taking some scissors, cutting that out and sticking it in. Well, with that done, this is where the main kind of armouring up of the vehicle, I guess you could call it, comes in. Now I don't tend to like to plaster my car in armour. You know, these things aren't really meant to look like tanks, they're just meant to look like they can take a couple of hits and not just, you know, only one and then explode. Or maybe they're putting barriers in place to stop people from entering the car, or stabbing through the windscreen and to just kill the driver instantly, you know? In this case I've used white Plasticard over the windows, both sides. I did think about putting a mesh over the windows, but again I'm going to leave that for a different build, a more advanced one where we're opening the car up and putting a mesh inside. So Plasticard over the windows with a little notch cut out either side for the little windscreen mirrors that have been moulded on. Besides that, I added some Plasticard armour over the rear wheel arches, and this is all scraps and offcuts, so it doesn't really matter if it doesn't look particularly neat. The Apocalypse doesn't look particularly neat, and that's what makes the Apocalypse, you know, it's everything's reused, everything they find a purpose for, and the same applies here. Okay, so after you've armoured up your vehicle or added any sort of solid details that you want to add, you've taken your file or your craft knife, you've damaged up your armour plates. So what I've moved on to now is working on the exhausts. I've opted for 3 down either side, and then in the centre going for a blower or an air intake that's again made from white Plasticard. I used a square piece of Plasticard offcut to cap the back of it, and then craft knife, cut the edges off, file it all smooth. Doesn't have to look perfect, nothing's perfect in the Wasteland. So one of the things I wanted to do before I wrapped this build up was add a couple of posts in the back for what could be flags or banners, but in this case I'm going to have a steering wheel attached to one of them. Nothing like a captured steering wheel as a trophy. But also looking at the bumper at the front of the truck. So it's a fantastic bumper and grille on this Hot Wheels car, absolutely love it. But by drilling holes along the base of the bumper and angling the holes so that they naturally aim outwards, I could then cut little bits of white plastic rod, stick those in, and give the impression that this has got a bit what I like to call, and what a few people call now, a Wasteland grin which is an array of spikes reaching up and outwards from your bumper to sort of catch any unlucky bugger that runs in front of you. Likewise, if you go in for someone's tyres or even manage to get your car on top of theirs, you can really do some damage. But this has been Wasteland Workshop with me, your Lord and Master. And I'll see you next time. Bye bye. Oh my god, this is what causes people to tear their hairs out. So the recording footage is an hour and 12 minutes long, and so far it's uploaded file 2 of 29. This will actually be the death of me. This was the worst idea I've ever had. Next time I say I've got a great idea, just slap me and just say no. Because apparently my ideas are all trash.